So I have the presentation just as a pointer for me to talk. There's nothing much on the presentation, but my point of view will be mostly from a developer's point of view, not as somebody who knows much about the law, but probably wants to stay within the law most of the times. I'm mostly going to talk about my experiences and my conflicts between open data and privacy. That's what generally makes me think when I'm doing a project. When I think about open data, mostly apparently it has shared screens. Monitors. Use someone else's laptop.
No.
Oh, okay. That's fine. So I consider. So I consider open data as a duty of the government. I just think it's the way it's their duty. I consider everything as either a duty or a right. It's mostly duty of government and right of citizens. That's how I consider things. And in case of open data, I consider it's their duty. And then we have certain laws to support it, which mostly what I use is RTI Act, or generally that's what I support my basis on. And there are always questions about it, but I don't think much. One of them is license. As you said, what is the license I use when I get an RTI response? I always consider it as most liberal. I just, even though I kind of agree with them by going by law, it's probably copyrighted to government or certain department to just answer to the question. But I consider it's been sent to me, and it's been for, I also consider the intention behind the question. If the question is regarding a public service, or like the intention of the question is to open up certain things, then I consider the response as open. But if the question is something very private of somebody, like for example, if somebody has asked his own PPF details and stuff like that, then I consider it to be private. So it's like a little subjective, but it mostly depends on me. But I consider most of the things as public as long as it things. Then there is there is always privacy issue when I talk about. As much as I talk about open data, I also consider privacy is really important. So when both of them come together, I have this huge conflict. But generally, I consider it as a right of anybody and everybody, whether it's a government service person or me, that he has a right to, has his privacy and to keep his information private. And one of the laws is this. I don't know whether there's any Indian law which supports privacy of any person, as far as I know, other than right to live, probably.
Of course, Article 21, but to a limited extent also, the rules made under Section 43A of the Information Technology Act would also apply to a number of situations. But that's a separate topic that's going to take a long time to discuss. So just noting that those of you who are interested could read the rules under Section 43A of the Information Technology Act.
So there is this conflict every time I do a project. For example, one of the projects I was doing was ask your government. So there are certain questions which I wanted to ask the government, and actually I wanted to publish the responses. Whatever the government sends as response as part of RTI. So when I got this, when I started this project, there were certain conflicts whether was it okay to publish people's addresses, or like there were volunteers who would send questions to the government and then we would get the response back. And when you start graying certain parts of the PDF, what parts do you gray out and what parts you don't gray out? That's a question which I didn't want to answer at that point of time because it's a complex question, right? I mean, you want to where are you going to also gray out the person who has responded to the question? Because there's a good chance that he will get targeted. Maybe he's just a clerk. So there are certain questions. So at one point I decided I wouldn't gray out anybody because most of the time it's a question asking were people at certain privilege where who are okay with exposing their addresses and stuff like that. But at the same time, the Railways of India came out with this plan of publishing all the RTA responses online. So if you probably had sent a question to like Railways, Indian Railways, asking any private question, doesn't matter, or any public question, all your responses are online. So if you go to this site, one sec. I have to move the show first.
FLN should work.
And then F11 should work, right? Okay, and then we'll come back. Oh, they'll come back. Okay, anyway, it's called Railway Act.
Control T.
So here if you go, so this is the response system. So you could actually view anybody's reply. So if you go to click view reply,
Yeah, the prompt was used to.
so let's say I'll search anybody. It's a PF. Or I can search retirement, which is something like very generic PF or something, and you could see their replies and even their questions and notings and stuff. So it's like so this is where government is conflicting with itself, right? At some point they say, RTS is a private response to you, and at some point they publish all the RTS. So at that point, people are asking this question: you publish your own RTAs, and what's the problem you have with government publishing the same thing? But that's where the judgment comes into picture, right? I mean, there are so many questions here where people are asking about their transfer. Why did I get transferred from this location to this location? Or there were people who were asking about why did I get my PF in time with their account numbers and stuff like that. So this is like a huge privacy breach, if you consider me. And in modern times, it can be used for anything, right? I mean, there could be social engineering to get some details if you think about it. So this is where I think when we do a project, I think this fight between open data and privacy has to be handled case by case. There is no as far as I know, I'm not been able to find like any generic solution for it. So the other one I was so I generally consider when I have only two things when I'm in conflict. I was thinking whether this is trying to keep institutions in privacy. Generally, the thing I go with is privacy is for individuals and open data is for institutions. So when it's other way, for example, when institutions try to achieve privacy, that's when there is there's a need for open data. On the other side, if something is exposing individuals' private data, that's when the privacy needs to be. So this is I find that as my go-to answer. Like if I'm in a conflict. So that's been, until now, that's been working very well. So I mean, I think you would have heard this. This is a very powerful quote by I think Julian Assange. So which states very clearly that, I mean, I think I mostly agree with the statement that transparency is required as much as you go up in the power. Whereas like when you go higher up in the institutional power, I think you need to be more transparent, and when you come lower and lower, when you become more individual, you need more privacy. So I go with this same assumption, since there's no standard guidelines. So that's what I just wanted to talk about, just share with you guys. So that's where my conflicts, I don't know how you guys resolve your conflicts between open data and privacy. And this is in theory, at least should work for both private companies and government organizations. If the data is about private company as such, I think it should be open. For example, their filings, their yearly filings, their yearly reports and stuff like that, that should be open. But when it comes to probably their employees or their consumers, and that data needs to be private. So this kind of applies in any, both in private company and government, that kind of context. So I think it kind of works as a simple guidelines to, litmus test your case. That's it. If you have any questions, I can answer, or we can answer together. There is actually quite other interesting things. Anyway, I think there are other departments going open with their RTAs as well. My guess is by doing so, they want to, it's my evil guess, but by doing so, they want to avoid people sending them the request so that they're scared of. There are a lot of cases where RTA activists being attacked. When you send a request to government thing, the communication is supposed to be, I think, from between the person and PIO should be like private communication. And when it comes back, it's private. I mean, other than the government and the individual, I think it shouldn't go out anywhere. So the point of leak is either by the government or by the person. So, when you're at a happens on a RTA activist, when he sends a specific question, so you could kind of guess who did it, on which side. But when this happens, when it's publicly open, so it kind of puts people into danger to ask difficult questions, because then somebody can say it's already open, so anybody could see and anybody could have attacked, and I didn't think it was already there. So it kind of puts a lot of people under pressure. In a way, it makes people to ask less number of questions and ask less number of dangerous questions, which is kind of scary because you want to ask really important questions.
I don't know whether I should phrase it as a question or a slight disagreement, which is that if the person is imperiling themselves, not necessarily by asking questions, they're imperiling themselves by challenging powerful people, right? So because there can be ways that you can get around this asking questions business. For instance, by having my friend in Assam contact me and I file the RTI claim, query instead. Okay, that way you get around this problem. But even if you do that, if my friend in Assam, if she has to actually take up a case and use that information, well, she's still getting herself into trouble. So yes, information such as your address, etc., being made publicly available is part of the problem. But even if you fix that, you're actually not. The larger problem is one of rule of law. The larger problem is one of having adequate protection and democratic protections in our country. And this is only a part of the larger problem. But and this might help fix part of the problem, but won't actually help fix the problem. Ideally, if we have great rule of law, then this won't even be part of the problem at all. then you could legitimately say, this is my address, okay, these are the questions that I've asked, and this is how I'm challenging power, and I should have nothing to fear in doing so. Right? So as an example, in Norway, they actually make public everyone's tax returns. Right? It's online, it's searchable. Now, for many years, it was offline. So it was always available. Since the 90s, I think at least people could always refer to it, but I think of around 4, 5, 6 years ago, they decided to put it online as well. And that created a lot of controversy, and but they continue to do so, right? And so it I think is also very contextual.
It's slow. That's why I said it's my evil guess, but
absolutely. So we don't actually disagree. We just see different sides of it.
and on the other side, when there's no laws to protect you, you probably want to hide. That's the case. Yeah, that's it.
Tej, would you take 2 minutes to explain about the geo information that I saved the mark.n?
Okay. Again, I think I will give a point of view from a developer, and you can probably give a point of view from a lawyer. As such, I think it's a rubbish. We didn't require one. We have probably other laws which already makes whatever they are trying to do, and the intention of the policy is stated by them is to protect the external boundaries of India. Protect as in make everybody publish the right external boundaries of India, and as well secure some of the most sensitive buildings or locations. As far as the external boundaries, I think it is covered by certain other laws. I think it's already illegal if you don't represent boundaries in a certain way, and I'm not completely sure about how to go about mapping the sensitive buildings, but probably it's already under certain law. But I think my issue with that it's been huge. It's really broad as such. I read a quote somewhere that if you live a normal life today, you're probably breaking 5 laws every day. So if somebody wants to catch you, they could probably sue you. Like you're already breaking 5 laws. Now with this, I think you're breaking one more law, living your normal life. So that's my thing. And obviously, I think we all agree that a country has a need to protect its external boundaries, and the country needs to protect its sensitive areas. As the best they could have done is to limit the policy to only those 2 most important things and leave out the rest of them. But at present, in its draft state, it kind of makes everything what we do, including what the request is sent with this map link with geolocation of this building, probably done by Google, which is not vetted by some policy maker, makes it illegal. So because you're sending it to me, probably you're distributing and sharing, so that would be legal. Or I run this project called Open Postbox, which I like mapping post boxes across India. Some of them are in government campuses, and some of them are in some places but postbox itself is a public utility if you think about it. Everybody knows where it is. You can tell someone that there's a postbox next to Vidhan Saudha. Why don't you go post there? That's like a public information. But if I map the thing which is Vidhan Saudha campus, it could become illegal as of today's thing. So probably anything, most things what we do could fall under that. So maybe should.
Okay, do you have a copy of the bill on your laptop? Can you just project that?
Bill itself?
Yeah, the draft bill.
It's linked on the saved mark.n.
So how many of you have actually taken a look at this bill, or have, how many of you have heard about the bill? No, not everyone has
I think
actually.
we have to give them basic context.
So do you want to give a brief context for the bill as well, Tej, since not everyone's heard of it?
Okay. So here's a copy of bill. Very open. It's connected to my mobile. So this is a draft bill formed by Ministry of External Affairs, if I'm correct.
Home Affairs.
Home Affairs. The intention of the bill is to, protect. I think the intention is very clearly mentioned below. Aim of the bill is this. Aim of the bill is to regulate the acquisition, dissemination, publication, distribution of geospatial information of India, which is likely to affect security, sovereignty, integrity of India. That's like the main intention of the bill, to protect those three things of India. With that regards, it kind of controls these verbs, these actions by anybody, which is acquisition, dissemination, publication, distribution. So I think acquisition generally means, I think, downloading or acquiring any kind of geo information. I think when I say geo information, I'm not completely sure of what exactly it means. As of now, I think it's digital, so I think anything that is associated with some kind of lat and long, whether it's a point, line, or a polygon. If it has a lat and long, I think that we can consider as geospatial information. So it kind of control that, and the idea is for anybody to publish or distribute, even to acquire it, that information has to be vetted by a committee, which is formed by the central government. So you will send your maps or whatever information to them. They'll go through it and they'll put a seal on it, and you will share that information along with that seal. Even mention that you need to show that seal. So, for example, if you're showing a OpenStreetMap, at the bottom of the thing, you probably have to show that it's been vetted by so and so. So that's like the requirement. If that requirement is not met, and if they, when it becomes real law, and if you've been caught with publishing this, you can be sent to jail for up to 7 years with like a fine up to 100 crores. Imagine that for publishing an Instagram picture. So that's the broad things. And if there are updates to the information, let's say you got vetted by certain things, and a user of yours adds a comment to that or adds more information to that, like for example, you have mapped a post box and somebody adds more information to that information, even probably that needs to be vetted again. So this is like a not one-time process. It should happen again and again. Now, considering so much of GIS information today is real time. Roads change in Bangalore from one way to the other day, every other day. So imagine updating that in OpenStreetMap, sending it forward. Before your car GPS downloads it and makes you go in a real direction. That's human being involved. Let's say there is a self-driving car which needs to get that. That can be a disaster at that level. Over and above, there could be many others. This is disastrous to everyone. The whole idea was listening to all the newspaper articles and the comments by the MPs and other things. This was brought in to control certain foreign companies publishing maps or the borders and other things. But the law is so broad that it not only hits at really big companies, it hits at everyone, including user to the smaller startups to bigger companies, Indian companies to bigger or smaller foreign companies. So it kind of works, according to me, against their own Make in India or Digital India thing, where they wanted to actually bring down the number of laws and policies to encourage it. Now I think it's going the other way, bring more policies to stop innovation. So the policy is asking for comments. So you can send your comments by June 2nd, which is 30 days from May 4th.
I would beg all of you to please send in comments, even if it is just 2 lines.
Yes.
Okay, please send in comments, because this is disastrous.
So far we have got just 900 responses, so we need more responses.
Yeah, I think so if you really don't know what exactly you want to write, there is a template which you can use, and like go ahead and edit as much as you want. But if you don't want to edit anything and just want to send, you can just send that. Even if it's one line that this would affect my day-to-day usage of map, should be fine. But if you want to go through it, it's like this template is pretty decent for any like normal regular person. So I think it should go.
Is this some harebrained scheme for revenue generation?
No.
So there is a little bit of fee involved, but I don't think its aim is at generating revenue.
Because which numbers?
So as of now, even today's, as per today's thing, I think the only organization which is authorized to publish Indian maps is Survey of India. Yeah. So they are the only one who is authorized. So there's already enough infrastructure, if you really want to do the things. But I don't think this bill is aimed at, generating revenues. But I think it's aimed at. I agree with the whole aim of it. Actually, I don't disagree with the aim of it. But I disagree with the amount of rules or policy brings into it. The aim is actually very clear, right? Aim is.
Could I also just add something about?
Aim is this. Aim is to control something likely to affect security, sovereignty, integrity of India. Nobody can oppose the aim. The aim is pretty straightforward.
But if I may just jump in, one thing I'll add. No, it's okay. I think I'm loud enough, right? If I may just add. I am quite sympathetic to this aim. However, I'm not sure whether a law, whether of this sort, and I'm pretty sure the government doesn't want to pass this. Okay, this is just a disaster. The subsequent comments in an article in the Hindu, etc., shows they realize it's a disaster. Okay, they're going to change it. They're not going to pass it like this. But I'm concerned, even after it gets changed, even after it gets revised, it's not going to be much better. As long as there are any kind of permission-seeking requirements, I don't think it's going to be any better. And even on the 2 points where I am sympathetic to the government, okay, those 2 points being one, display of high security establishments on maps. Why won't anything of this sort work? Well, because the extent of the jurisdiction of this is, it can only have any effect on Indians or those who come under India's jurisdiction. Now, I don't know about you, but I haven't read many accounts of, say, Naxalites using high-resolution maps to carry out attacks, or those arguing for Dravida Nadu actually making use of high-security establishments on maps and their locations, or anything of that sort. So the point is, as long as it's Indians and display in India that's being affected, how useful is this going to be? Because this is not going to affect the ability of satellites to actually take those high resolution imagery. It's not going to affect that at all, because all of that is outside our jurisdiction. Right? So it's not going to affect state-sponsored terrorism. They're not using maps created by Indians to carry out those attacks. Right? They're not using ISRO data, right, to carry out those attacks. So it's not actually going to make an impact. It's not actually going to make things better. So while I'm very sympathetic to that aim, I don't see how any regulation of Indian mapping can fix the problem that they're seeking to fix. And secondly, in terms of the boundaries of India, now that's also something that I'm sympathetic to, right? However, there are a number of problems. One is that of freedom of speech and expression. There are many amongst us who dream of an Akhand Bharat.